extending that key seat. And of course, when that happens, you have a chance of higher dogleg severities and getting stuck. Micro doglegs, just similar to getting dog legs. You sort of see wobble in the bit, and this wobble sort of creates small angles, and you no longer have a good smooth well bore, but rather you have something that is like a snake, right? And this constant change or the constant walk, one of the reasons is the sandwich nature of the formations through which you are drilling. So in this particular picture, that sandwich nature is depicted by sand, shale, sand, shale. Now, what's happening here is that you're going through this sandwich of hard and soft rock. It's very difficult to maintain certain properties, of the drilling fluid as well as the whole drilling process itself, right? Because you're constantly going through this kind of a laminated formation. When do you change your weight on bit? How do you change, or increase or decrease the mud weights? And at the same time, the erratic drilling that you are going through. So these causes this erratic nature causes this kind of a snake type of a profile, and and causes these micro dog legs, which can be scenarios or situations for where you're going to see your pipe getting stuck. Ledges, these are again um, protrusions from the formation or abnormal washouts in the formation. Again, a lot of the times in a sandwich sort of scenario where you have hard and soft formations, this is where you could see some of these scenarios. Drilling through faults could also be a reason to see some of these ledges sticking out. And what happens when you have this? Typically, you see that you struggle to move the drill pipe, and many a times you have to come back and ream these ledges out because it's not permitting lowering the string again. So you got to have some kind of a reamer in your string, and you're constantly having to work back and forth to ream the wellbore. A project that I'm working on in the Cambay Basin, it's actually the field is called Ankleshwar, and ONGC is drilling over here. I mean, it's a very well-known field, has been producing from the 1970s, but uh, it is sort of a drilling nightmare because of these constant ledges. And what happens is that to keep the wellbore in shape, that means to keep it open, not have all these wellbore collapses happening, you constantly have to keep reaming and doing wiper trips. So a simple well, 3,000-meter well, which could be completed, in fewer days, it takes much longer because of the additional wiper trips and back reaming that you have to do. But if you don't, then you start seeing lots of issues with pipe getting stuck and poor wellbore cleaning. Mobile formations, these are and some of you uh, might be hearing this for the first time, or On the contrary, some might be very well versed with it. Mobile formations are like salts, are called as mobile formations because the salt is constantly moving. It's a buoyancy effect. Salt, even though it is considered to be a formation, it is many a times you can think of it as a fluid as well. It's it's not very well consolidated, and it's constantly moving. Now, something like this, where the formation moves, and some cases it could also be shales that are like that, which are not very well consolidated and they are moving. Now, what happens in this kind of scenarios is that you're drilling through these, but there is a lot of pressure changes that constantly keep happening. So you have these sudden situations where you are seeing an increase in torque in your drilling process, and the the formation is sort of sliding under you, so to say. It's not at the constant depth. And if you have this kind of a scenario, then maintaining a mud weight to drill through that kind of a plastic formation, it's extremely difficult. And you're constantly seeing some kind of a overburden squishing this particular formation. Think of it like a sponge. If you're pressing on it, there's a lot of fluid that is coming out, completely fluid soaked sponge, so to say. Rare encounters, but there are around the world, many places where you have these salt diapiers and they are moving around. And of course, undergauged holes. Um, Many a times, we ourselves, for the purpose of coring or for the purpose of easy drilling, sometimes we drill undergauge holes intentionally, and then we sort of ream them to make it of a bigger size. I'll give you an example. Um, if you want to have a good formation evaluation program, certain logging tools, wireline logging tools, work very well in smaller wellbore sizes. Large wellbores, they are not very suitable for logging measurements. Now, if a company wants to take a lot of, it's sort of a data intensive well, a geoscience intensive well. Uh, you could drill a smaller wellbore, acquire the logs, and then go back and ream that wellbore to make it into a larger size. It's not very easy and not very uniform to ream a wellbore to make it to a bigger size. It's not like you are drilling through it. Sometimes you're just reaming through it. So if the formation is really hard, or if the reaming process is not very good, you can have abnormal sizes in the wellbore, or you could have scenarios where you can have a corkscrew wellbore, corkscrew. So certain places the wellbore is larger, certain places it is smaller. This kind of a scenario is sort of a risk scenario where you suddenly see that your bottom hole assemblies could get stuck in there because you don't have a very well gauged wellbore. In certain places, it is undergauged. The this was all about stuck pipe. The next few slides that we're going to talk about are the other two causes, which is borehole instability, and the other one was formation damage, right? So what I wanted to share with you all was in more detail about lost circulation and wellbore problems. I think those are sort of the major drilling complications that you see. I'm not discounting borehole instability over here. It's a huge topic and an important one, but has got a significant focus on geomechanics, right? Whenever you talk about borehole instability, what the very first thing that comes to your mind is geomechanics, stress, right? Stress regimes. Now, this is an excellent picture where we are sort of comparing everything in terms of mud weight. And that is one of our basic tools to control how we drill a well, right? The mud weight. Now, here we have a scale that goes from too low a mud weight, very less, to too high a mud weight. Obviously, if you talk about too high a mud weight, I think we have been discussing a few things as we have come along. If the mud weight is too high, you're going to frack into the formation. If you're higher or greater than the formation fracture gradient or the formation fracture pressure, that's how the process of hydraulic fracturing works, right? I'm sure some of you who have already taken those classes have studied that. You have to exceed the frac pressure of that particular rock. So it's all about rock strength, and the holistic approach to that is called geomechanics. So if your mud weight is too high, you basically are going to frack into it. That is, if you're greater than the tensile failure. Now, there is a frac gradient that we talk about. And if you're greater than that, you're going to have some mud loss, total loss circulation if you're fracking into the formation. And that is the intent of hydraulic fracturing, that you want your fluid to go in, create those fractures and keep them open so that you can produce from them. Now, some mud loss can cause ballooning effects. Again, ballooning in that direction depends upon the near wellbore stress that you're looking at, right? Of course, the ideal scenario for us is to know that mud weight window that we call the safe mud weight window. And if we know that, then we basically are drilling a nice gun barrel wellbore. Only happens in textbooks and in certain scenarios around the world. You always see some abnormalities in the wellbore. Breakout, if you're having some sort of a change in the near wellbore stress. And you can see over here, you're breaking out. If we have to just use, if the top is to the north, then we are breaking out in the east-west direction. And the east-west is the direction of minimum stress. Breakouts are in the minimum stress. Fractures are in the maximum stress direction. And if it is too low, obviously, you're below the pore pressure, then you cannot sustain this wellbore. You're going to end up collapsing. You're going to see shear failures, like how you see tensile failure here. It should have been labeled shear failure on this side, or, probably below the shear failure gradient. You are starting to see the breakouts and then obviously the collapse. Collapse of the wellbore or a major kick major kick is a lot of fluid from the bottom coming to the surface and can cause issues. I think it was covered in that video with talking about the pressures as well. What do these mean? This is obviously a cartoon depiction, but what does it mean? When we look at our real scenarios, we obviously want that gauged well bore, but in some cases, you start seeing that, depending upon the rock strength, depending upon the nature of the rock, you start seeing issues that keep happening. Here in this case, if the mud weight was way too high as compared to the pore pressure in this particular formation, you start seeing that cracking is happening, and that's how hydraulic fractures work. In shales, sometimes if you have a swelling shale, that means a shale that is drinking mud and getting hydrated, then you start seeing this kind of a scenario where a swelling shale could reduce the size of the well bore, and you start seeing a tight hole, which eventually could lead to pipe getting stuck. And another scenario obviously is brittle rock collapsing or slogging shales collapsing, which also we call as breakouts. And you start seeing these overgauged well bores. So in any of these kind of scenarios, you are going to see issues with, how borehole instability is going to cause the pipe to get stuck, right? Um, like I mentioned, I'm not dwelling too deep into this topic because it's a topic for geomechanics. It's a topic for understanding a lot of the stresses, not only tectonic stresses, but also localized stresses that are present in a wellbore. It's a great topic, but an advanced lecture topic, I think. That can add more to issues of borehole instability. Formation damage. When we talk about formation damage, we talk about clay swelling and we talk about fines migration. This sort of phenomena, I mean, is we talked about some of the other issues that we were seeing with clay swelling when we were talking about shales. And this sort of causes a lot of issues while we are drilling, and potentially causes for drilling complications. End of the day, our well plan um, does not just mean that drill a well bore and deliver the well bore, but it means that drill and deliver a well bore that can be completed and you can produce from it, right? If you get hydrocarbons, of course, that is the gamble that you take. Not every well is a producer. You do have dry holes, but the objective is that if there is hydrocarbon, if you strike hydrocarbon, you got to be able to complete the well and produce the well. And formation damage is one of the biggest hindrance to producing a well. And that's why you want to minimize this damage. What's happening if you look at it in a cartoon sort of sense, you are using drilling mud, you are in the well bore, you're using mud. This is your rock. Obviously has got some sort of, porosity and permeability. Depending upon the size of particles that are there in the drilling mud itself, once the mud cake is formed, remember I said there is a spurt loss, but the mud cake acts like a filter or a semi-permeable membrane that minimizes or stops the further invasion of drilling filtrate. But obviously, based on the size of the particles that are there and the permeability. So Here, now you got to start thinking, there's a lot of play of words that is coming up. The permeability of the mud cake versus the permeability of the formation. And of course, if you go to the SP store, you'll see there are like textbooks written on formation damage. It's a vast topic. There's lots to consider, not only during the drilling process, but formation damage is even looked at during the completions, during the perforations. Everywhere there is a man-made process that is interfacing with the formation. There's always a cause or a concern of damaging that. The finest particles obviously, break through the mud cake also depending upon the permeability and can enter into the porous rock. Once they enter, they basically fines migration. The concept is that you start seeing that it's plugging that permeability or plugging that pore space. The more it happens, the more plugging, the more the skin. Uh, if you recall from your reservoir engineering class, I mean, we constantly strive to somehow clean out that positive skin to, enhance or enable higher production. And that's kind of where the skin comes from. Consequences, I mean, it's quite straightforward, quite um, understanding that you want to minimize that damage so that you can increase your productivity. And if you don't, you are seeing some added cost and a decrease in your productivity, right? So we looked at wellbore problems. Let's sort of take a few minutes and look at mud problems. I know we have gone over 2 hours now, and like I said, there is a limit for attention span and for interest. After a certain time, everybody starts to lose interest. But I'll try to keep it interesting and cover these topics. But I'm going to have to request another class to sort of cover some of the drilling services that I need to talk about, because today we won't be able to accommodate all of that. Excuse me. I'm just using it to sort of, when we talk about mud problems, the very first thing you got to sort of revisit is the circulation system, right? And you can see we'll start from the bit because that's where we are drilling. The drill cuttings and the mud is carried back. It goes back to the mud return line. And from the mud return line, you go into the possum belly and the shale shaker. These are sort of equipments which are on the surface, rig floor if you're offshore or, on land, wherever you are. I'm sure some of you have visited and seen these in action. It's used to start, it's a start. These equipments are used to basically clean out the mud. What's happening? The mud over here, it's carrying all the cuttings, it's getting mixed with the cuttings, and it's carrying everything back and coming back to the return line. At the shakers, you start seeing some separation of the solids and the liquids. Certain solids are cleaned out, and obviously, the liquids are going back into a mud pit. From the pit, you basically go back into a mud pump. A mud mixer is where new mud is prepared or created. Mud pump is basically which sucks the mud from the mud pit after it has gone through some of the cleaning process. This diagram just shows a shale shaker. There is obviously a desander, desilter. There's lots of things. I think I have a slide later on additional equipment that's there to clean out all the impurities that are in the mud. And then goes back to the mud pump. From there again, it's pumped back and we are recirculating that mud, goes through the standpipe and back into the drilling system. So this is an old slide, obviously, showing the swivel and the Kelly and then going down the drill pipe. Modern day equipment, basically you'll see the top drive on the top here. There is a swivel, of course, and the top drive, no Kelly anymore. And then going back down into the wellbore, again, the same process, drill, pick out the impurities, come back to the surface and go through this. This circulation system, I'll talk more about this when we do the lecture on mud logging at some point. That's sort of the heart of what mud logging is, right? All these things coming back. But what's happening here? We are drilling and all the cuttings are getting mixed with the drilling mud and it's coming back. It's not just the cuttings, you are also getting the fluids that are there in the rocks, right? You could be going through a reservoir rock or multiple reservoir rocks and you could be getting back fluids. Earlier, I talked about those geo pressured shales. You could be getting back some of the gas from there. So what's happening? Mud is getting contaminated, right? So two of the problems that the mud faces is contamination and hole cleaning. I think we have spent quite a bit of time on hole cleaning, but there are pictures over here that talk about, how suspended particles, they settle down and how if you don't have enough gel strength, enough viscosity and all that, you could see some issues. But obviously, contamination is a big thing. You could be drilling cement plugs, you could be getting cement mixed in there, you could get clays mixed, gas, chlorides, hydrocarbons, whatever is there in the formation, it could be just getting mixed in with your mud. So what is happening? You have to filter those things out, right? First and foremost, your mud has two functions: clean the wellbore, stabilize the wellbore. To stabilize, there's a certain mud weight. If you start getting more and more gas mixed with your mud, that what's happening? It's sort of deteriorating your mud. Now, with the gas being present in the mud, you probably don't have as much density as you were expecting before. So what do drilling companies do? They constantly measure properties of mud going in and mud coming out. So going in from the flow lines, coming out at the shale shaker. They have lots of sensors. As a mud logger, when I was working, I mean, you will feel I'm exaggerating this point, but I'm not. There are roughly 300 measurements that advanced mud logging units take at the well site. I mean, some sensors, of course, are placed in the mud pits and some others are placed around the well site to monitor for H2S and things like that. But most of them are right around the rig floor: drawworks, standpipe, flow lines, return lines, possum bellies, mud pits, ROP sensors, weight on bit, weight on hook. All these kinds of measurements are done constantly to enable the whole drilling process. Now here I particularly wrote about the mud gas because that is something that needs to be cleaned out or needs to be even analyzed, right? So you can see advanced mud logging units will analyze that gas. You got to know what are you getting back. You have to know what sort of gases are present in your formation. As oil and gas professionals, you prefer that to be methane so that you can sell it, make money. Ethane, pentane, those higher ends, you can still live with some of those, but those are the ones that you're expecting or wanting. Uh, Dry gas, or if it is rich with some of us call it condensate, you still have a market and a sale for all those things. But what if you're getting carbon dioxide? What if you're getting nitrogen? What if you're getting H2S, hydrogen sulfide? That's a risk and a warning for us to know where we are and what is there, right? Of course, nowadays people stretch it to say, oh, I'm drilling for helium. Can I find helium? There are reservoirs that are producing just helium. People are drilling for lithium. So those things are, offshoots so for our discussion, but obviously those happen all the time. But here, primarily, what we want to do is get the gas out of that system so that that mud can be reused before it goes back again to the mud pumps and starts getting back into circulation. You want to strip all the gas out of it. And that's what the gas trap does. Extremely important to have that gas trap if you are expecting that some gas is coming back. And in most cases, there is some gas that definitely comes back. That's why they use these advanced mud logging systems, which have the ability to analyze and monitor those gas. C1 through C5 is definitely monitored. But sometimes, if you expect something else, then those gases are collected and obviously analyzed for other components or impurities as well. The next thing is solids removal, right? Like how you want to remove the gas out of the mud, you also want to remove the solids. What are the solids? Those are the drill cuttings primarily, but there could be cement in there, there could be some kind of steel, iron filings, depending upon if you ended up drilling through or milling through some of the equipment that was lost in there. You want to get your mud back in as close as to what you had prepared and you were using it, right? Of course, there are these kinds of equipments and the pictures that I'm sharing over here. Um, some of you probably have seen these and have maybe if you had an internship, you have worked with it. If not, you should, next time you visit, you should make it a point to go and look or ask the mud engineer to show you some of these equipments and how they're functioning. So, in addition to this, obviously you have, the desander, the desilter, but the objective here is to clean the mud, get it back into shape as what it was initially, so that you're minimizing that contamination. You're learning from that contamination, but you also are minimizing it. In some cases, trying to clean it out as much as possible to bring the mud back to its original condition. And of course, for the seepage loss and for that spurt loss that you keep seeing, you have to keep making new mud so that you keep adding on to this. So we covered wellbore problems, we covered some of the mud problems, right? Now we'll talk a little bit about mechanical problems. Like the picture shows, it's a busted drill pipe. You can see there is a crack and it's a broken drill pipe. Now, at a drilling site, at a drilling rig, all the equipment is constantly inspected. In fact, the derrick man and the assistant driller, that is one of their primary jobs, to ensure that all the equipment that they are running in the wellbore is in pristine condition. It's reworked equipment, right? Drill pipes are used over and over again and again, but they also have a certain life, and they undergo wear and tear. And time and again, you've got to swap them out, discard what is broken or what is not uh, up to mark, and replace it with newer ones. I remember working at the well site, one of the tasks that we had was to have a tally book in our hand and walk around with the derrick man and make up a pipe tally. Every pipe, you won't believe it, even though there are sophisticated equipment these days to move stuff around, you would see that people are measuring pipes, physically measuring, okay, using a tape measure, measuring length of the pipe, numbering the pipes, knowing the ID, that's inner diameter, OD, outer diameter. So using the slide calipers. I mean, probably we used it in our experiments in the ninth, 10th grade, or maybe in the 11th grade, 12th grade. After that, sometimes we overlook these kind of simple things. But when you get back in the field, this is where it becomes again and again critical to, start doing these fundamental things, fundamental physics and math. So measuring the inner diameter, outer diameter, knowing the condition of your equipment, very critical. So what are the mechanical problems? One obviously is not able to drill the hole the way you want to drill it, right? You're deviating from what you planned. And the other one is pipe failure. Now, there are many reasons for deviation. Nobody knows exactly causes, but people speculate, and all this is speculation, okay? What formation you are drilling in. And we talked about it earlier in some of the wellbore problems. You could have lithology which determines hard versus soft rock, right? Sandstone versus fractured limestone, shales versus salts, whatever. Anisotropy, formation dip. We talked about all these things that could be contributing to creating some kind of a deviation. Bottom hole assembly, BHA, its size and configuration. And I think one of the topics that I'm going to also include, Dr. Borka highlighted this to me after my previous lecture, that I should focus a little bit on bottom hole assembly. And ma'am, I have taken your suggestion and I'm going to prepare something so that I can emphasize. This is a good leading point into how important the bottom hole assembly is. And it includes, all kinds of equipment that is there at the bottom, right? If you are in a deviated well bore, we talk about positioning that well bore, and there are many ways of positioning it. We talk about downhole equipment. That's what I highlighted last time. But there are simple things where people use bent subs and the distance between the reamers and the bent subs and all these things, which can help to drill and position that particular wellbore in an angle. Then the weight on bit, drilling hydraulics, all those parameters that are there, the whole angle, annular clearance, bit type. What's your choice of bit? Tricone bit, rotary bit, PDC bit. all these things. I mean, these are vast topics in themselves, but these are all plausible causes for whole deviation. We don't know which one exactly is the reason. But what we know is there are forces that act on a bit, right? This we know for sure. And there are two main forces that at least we can classify them in two main categories. One is the bit rock interaction. How does the bit and the rock interact with one another? Of course, in the industry, we have bit manufacturing companies, right? They only manufacture bits. But you know how those bits are manufactured? By studying rock. They study rock strength first because the bit has to pulverize that rock. So they actually study a lot about rocks. They study a lot about rock strength. They study a lot about geomechanics before they actually start to design a bit. So that bit rock interaction. Sorry, is there a question? Is somebody talking or? Okay, I think just some volume that I heard. And then, of course, there is the drill string mechanics, right? This is all the play of the bottom hole assembly. And I think, like how Dr. Burka pointed out to me, and rightly so, I mean, she caught the right pulse that I should emphasize a little more on BHA design and talk a little more about how a BHA is designed for a directional well, a horizontal well, which I plan to do. But let me try to cover these topics first. So, bit rock interaction in a broad sense, we think of it in like three different categories. Percussion, which is a bit directly, the movement is right there on top of a rock. Drag is when it's pushing, the force is acting in two directions, top and to the side. So this is where you start seeing, when you're trying to move the bit and when you're trying to start to drill a bit of a deviated well bore, an angled well bore, and then the combination of the two, where you are having the percussion and the drag to build angles. Of course, you can elaborate a lot on these topics, but this is kind of where it sort of this is kind of the crux of the matter when you start talking about some of the whole deviation issues that could be leading to drilling complications. And the other one, of course, is the drill string mechanics. This is where, in a simple layman's language, I would say, we talk about buckling of the pipe, breaking of the pipe. And of course, it's a function of, how much weight we are putting on the bit and what sort of hole geometries are we trying to achieve, right? It is sort of a bigger topic. It is something that requires a little bit of elaboration, but I think it's a good segue into a discussion that I'll have at another point in time where we'll talk about, bottom hole assemblies and what drives the choice of certain bottom hole assemblies, what considerations do we want to make while we are assuming the bottom hole assembly. For today, I'm going to stop over here because we have almost done 2.5 hours already. We'll do some question answers, try to clarify certain doubts. I'm going to request your organizers to try and give me another slot to cover some of the drilling services. I know I had originally planned to do both of them today, but as I was going through the material and building on some things, I was realizing that rushing through it is is not that great, even though in some cases you might say we just touched upon certain topics, but it at least gives you some ideas, a complete picture of what all could be happening, rather than just rushing through all the topics. So we will try to do the drilling services as a different lecture, which includes mud logging, LWD, MWD, rotary steerables. Those kind of topics are there in that, and of course the BHA design. So I'll do that another day. Today, I want to thank you for your time. Of course, sitting through